Time now to kick off the July roundtable, and joining us this morning, Democratic political analyst Marianne Marsh, Republican political analyst Rob Gray. Great to see you guys. Happy 4th of July weekend. Great to see you. So let's start with the Supreme Court and the decision to end affirmative action in the college admission process. The vote was 6-3. The three liberal justices all in dissent. Politically, what does this mean for 2024? Marianne, let me start with you.
So let's be clear. The Supreme Court on Thursday and Friday legalized discrimination. An affirmative action is not just being able to discriminate against people of color, specifically blacks and Hispanics getting into college. This now opens the door to discriminate in jobs, housing, military, contracts, all of it. And when it came to the ruling on Friday about the gay couple who wanted a website, that's not just about denying services to gay couples. It's opening the door to ending gay marriage, interracial marriage, all of those things. So last year when Dobbs came down and half the country was discriminated against, women for getting an abortion, we, others said that this would happen. Well, here we are. And so now we have a Supreme Court with a 6-3 majority who is now openly legalizing discrimination in this country.
Rob?
I think the abortion ruling will have a much potentially larger political effect than the affirmative action ruling. Frankly, I think fairness comes into play with affirmative action, and I think a lot of Americans agree with what the Supreme Court did. Also, our delegation has looked terrible on this. Senator Ed Markey, it is a 6-3 majority. What's Ed Markey want to do? Hey, we're losing at the end of 9 innings. Let's extend the game for 2 more innings and see if we can win. He wants to add justices to the court. It doesn't work that way. But I think there's little political effect of the affirmative action ruling.
But I would just say 2 things. One, polling overwhelmingly shows that people are opposed to all of these measures, number 1. And number 2, when you anger women, half of the country, blacks, Hispanics, and, on the student debt loan, people who owe money, the younger and older, that's a winning formula for Democrats.
But I think on affirmative action, you got to realize that in 9 states, this was already in effect for higher education. So I think that the edges of this aren't as hard as they are in the abortion ruling.
9 state doesn't make 50.
Politically.
Well, let's talk about the student loan decision a little bit. I mean, here we are now, it's July. The election isn't for another year and a half. How much will that, this was certainly a cornerstone of President Biden's agenda. So how much will that play into the election, do you think?
Well, people who owe student loans have plenty to be mad about. And they're not only young folks, as we talked about, and you said in the segment with Barry Feingold, it's also the majority of people who owe the money are senior citizens. And all of those people make $75,000 or less. So women, blacks, Hispanics, young people, whether it's abortion, student loans, go down the line, discrimination, gay rights, all of it, have plenty to be mad about, and they are going to be really mad going into 2024.
In terms of the student loan situation, do you think that that's going to be an effective tool for Democrats in 2024?
I think the Supreme Court helped Biden on this. They saved Biden. I mean, the president, it's not a dictatorship. The president can't just say, hey, we're forgiving all the student loans. I mean, can he say, we'll forgive all the small business loans too? We'll forgive all the IRS penalties? No. Congress has to be involved, number 1. Number 2, again, a fairness issue here. The people who repaid their loans, right? The people who worked 2 jobs to pay for college and not take loans, they were very angry at Biden for doing this. Now it's undone by the Supreme Court. I think it helps Biden.
Next item. Both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis held events in New Hampshire this week. One Granite State voter summed it up this way. Listen.
This country needs Donald Trump. It doesn't need someone that wants to pretend to be Donald Trump.
And those comments coming after the audio tapes of Trump allegedly showing off secret documents went viral. Still, Governor DeSantis would not go on the offensive. Again, what gives here, Marianne? Why will he not go on the offensive? Why won't he put the gloves on and swing?
It's simple. Ron DeSantis does not have the standing with voters to be believed. Even if he's telling the truth about Donald Trump, they don't believe him. They believe Trump even when he lies. So DeSantis' only hope is to get people to like him, and that would require a personality transplant at this point, so that's too late. And he's using hope, thinking Trump will get knocked out of the race and they'll pick him, and that's no guarantee either.
What do you think, Rod?
Of course, the New Hampshire voter is right. DeSantis' strategy is all wrong. I mean, he's trying to be Trump's mini-me, and, when faced with a choice between mini-me and Dr. Evil, people are going with Dr. Evil here. And DeSantis should be talking about the future. He should be talking about Trump's age. He should be talking about Trump being a big spender, Trump raising taxes on some people. He has an advantage, but he's running his campaign the wrong way. DeSantis has an advantage being younger, newer, being able to say, hey, I can be president for 2 terms. But this guy is near 80.
A teenager in Ron DeSantis' event asked specifically if President Trump violated the peaceful transfer of power, and DeSantis' answer was essentially that he wasn't there. He didn't have anything to do with it. Wow. I mean, that was an opportunity for DeSantis if he wanted to criticize the former president.
If you don't differentiate yourself, you can't win in politics.
But DeSantis, the more they see him, the less they like him. So he's not taking any chances.
Could use a personality transplant.
Correct.
That's the other problem.
President Biden taking more heat over his son Hunter. His response is getting more testy. This is his reaction to being asked whether or not he was sitting next to his son Hunter while texting business associates in China.
Were you sitting there? Were you involved? No, I wasn't. I don't know. Were you? No.
Does the Hunter factor have the potential to significantly hurt President Biden's reelection hopes, Rob?
Hunter is a political powder keg waiting to blow. Sleazy business dealings with our enemies, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And it's not just Hunter, too. It's Joe Biden's brother as well. The family business is taking money from our enemies for political influence.
What do you think, Marianne?
Let's talk facts. Ivanka Trump, an advisor to her father in the White House for 4 years, made $646 million, incling many licensing fees from China, who he was doing business with.
The Trump kids are sleazy, too.
Okay, well, let me keep going here. So
I'm with you.
No investigation there, no screaming and yelling. I won't even talk about the $2 billion Jared took from the Saudis after he walked out the door. So here we go. Everyone who's complaining about Hunter Biden are the same people who did Benghazi in 2016. So when there are facts, not like a mystery guy who was disappeared and maybe left, not when there's like all these made up tapes and everything else. So when there are facts on Hunter Biden, let's talk about it then.
Why is Joe Biden so sensitive, though? Something is there beneath the surface.
I think he's defending his son who's an addict.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm enjoying this. We're back after with the roundtable after this break. Stay with us.